If you are anything like us, you are always looking for new ways to understand how the world works.
Right.
You probably enjoy finding those unexpected connections between completely different fields.
Oh, absolutely. Those are the best.
Yeah, the kind of insights that completely change how you approach your own daily challenges. And today's deep dive comes from a highly unexpected place. It offers a really fascinating window into that exact kind of cross-disciplinary thinking.
It really does.
We are looking at a single, relatively short blog post published on March 9th, 2026.
Oh.
It was posted on a website called kianmeng.org, and the title is Notes on Gardening Part 828, the Flame Dwarf Cultivar of the Plumed Celosia.
It sounds incredibly niche at first glance.
Right.
I mean, a single post about a specific flower cultivar.
It's one flower, yeah.
But the context surrounding this documentation is what elevates it from a simple gardening diary into this brilliant case study on systems thinking and adaptation.
Exactly. And our mission today is to explore the collision of two very different worlds. We're going to examine how the highly structured, intensely logical mind of a software developer tackles the organic, messy, and completely unpredictable world of botany.
Which is a wild contrast.
It is. By looking at how this individual approaches one tiny specific flower, we are going to discover some profound lessons about how we adapt to our own environments, regardless of what field we happen to work in. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really appreciate the profound nature of this short gardening update, we first have to understand the mind of the person who wrote it.
Right, the author.
Yeah, the author goes by the name Ang.
And Ang has this wonderful self-description on his site that I think kind of sets the tone for everything he does.
Well, the plumber thing.
Yes, he calls himself an old software plumber.
I love that.
Right? Because it instantly strips away the pretension you sometimes see in the tech world. He isn't claiming to be some grand architect of the digital universe.
He's a plumber.
He focuses on utility. He fixes the leaks. He connects the pipes. He keeps the data flowing reliably from point A to point B. And he mentions that he spends his nights tinkering with floss.
Right, and for those who might not be familiar, that stands for Free Libre and open source software.
Exactly.
Essentially, it is software that anyone is freely allowed to use, study, modify, and distribute. It requires a highly collaborative, deeply analytical mindset.
But Ang also notes that he occasionally dabbles in, quote, some other stuffs.
And when you look at the architecture of his website, you realize that some other stuffs is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
A massive amount.
The sidebar of this blog reveals that we aren't just looking at a casual occasional diary. We are looking at a monument to meticulous data tracking and experiential learning.
The sheer scale of Ang's archive is staggering. Since 2011, he has built an archive of thousands upon thousands of posts.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And this isn't just a slow, random trickle of updates. For the last 4 years alone, he has published twice a day, every single day.
Every day.
That level of consistency paints a picture of a mind that is relentlessly processing information and documenting reality. And remember the title of today's source material notes on Gardening Part 828.
Right.
This isn't his 828th post overall.
Sure.
This is his 828th post strictly about gardening.
What's fascinating here is how this represents the absolute ultimate multidisciplinary mindset.
Yeah.
When we look at the tags and the categories of these daily posts, we see the systematic analytical framework of a programmer being actively mapped onto the messy, unpredictable reality of daily life and hobbies.
In his projects list, you see his core professional interests clearly laid out. There are notes on Haskell programming, notes on Go notes, on Python notes, on Rust.
Heavy technical stuff.
Highly complex programming languages that require intense precision logic and structured problem solving. But right alongside those technical manuals giving the exact same level of rigorous tracking are projects like betta spawn logs.
Fish keeping. Yeah.
Notes on fish keeping notes, on meditation notes, on dieting, and notes on home improvement.
This is exactly why his approach is so relevant to you, the listener. It is very common for people to strictly compartmentalize their lives.
Definitely.
We have our professional skills, the rigorous, structure-tested ways we solve problems at work, and then we have our hobbies or personal goals where we tend to just wing it and hope for the best.
Just kind of see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Ang bridges that gap. The same mind that is optimizing lines of code in a Python script is observing the variables in his fish tank in his garden.
Tracking everything.
He's tracking the inputs, observing the outputs, and logging the results to create a massive interconnected database of his own lived experience.
It is almost as if he is debugging his garden.
That's a great way to put it.
Which brings us to the specific subject of Part 828. Amidst all of this programming, fish keeping, and life tracking, Ang has developed a clear focus on one particular plant, the Plumed Celosia.
Specifically, its scientific name is Celosia argentea variety plumosa. It is a striking botanical specimen known for these bright, feathery, flame-like flower heads that really stand out in a garden.
But Eng isn't writing this post about the standard, everyday version of this plant. He notes that while he has been cultivating different varieties of Celosia for a while, he is currently hunting for one very elusive cultivar. He calls it the flame dwarf cultivar.
Right.
The source provides some exact measurements that help us understand why this distinction matters so much to him. A regular plumed celosia grows quite tall, reaching anywhere from 60 centimeters to 90 centimeters in height.
It's a big plant.
It is. But the flame dwarf cultivar is tiny in comparison. It stands at only 15 centimeters to 30 centimeters.
So we're talking about a plant that is effectively a third of the size of the standard variety.
Exactly. So if the standard plant is so impressive and towering, why is he obsessing over a miniature version?
Right, why bother?
Let's think about this in terms of architecture. If the regular 90-centimeter plumed celosia is a flashy skyscraper taking up vertical space in a city skyline, the 15-centimeter dwarf cultivar is a sturdy, highly efficient, single-story bungalow.
Oh, I like that analogy.
The skyscraper looks impressive from a distance, but it demands a massive amount of structural resources to maintain its height, and it catches all the wind. The bungalow stays close to the ground, rock solid, completely unfazed by the elements around it.
That analogy perfectly captures the functional difference Aang is looking for. He isn't collecting plants just for their aesthetic appeal or to check boxes on a list. He is looking for utility.
Utility over looks.
Exactly. According to his notes, the dwarf cultivar boasts two distinct functional advantages over its taller sibling.
First advantage she points out is its structural density. The text notes that the dwarf cultivar boasts denser foliage.
Because it isn't spending all of its cellular energy and resources trying to stretch upward to reach almost a meter in height, it grows outward.
Right.
Becomes thick and robust. Aang specifically mentions that this characteristic makes it an incredibly functional plant for a gardener, serving as a perfect ground cover or a pot filler. It acts as a living carpet that protects the soil beneath it.
And the second advantage is arguably even more crucial for his specific gardening environment. The text explicitly states that this miniature version is much more tolerant to our intense heat.
That phrase, intense heat, introduces the most critical variable in this entire gardening equation.
It changes everything.
It does. The tall skyscraper version of the celosia might look beautiful in a mild climate, but in an intensely hot environment, all of that vertical surface area becomes a massive liability.
It's just too exposed.
Right. It loses moisture faster and struggles against the sun. The bungalow version, the dwarf cultivar, manages its microclimate better by staying low and dense. It shades its own roots, it retains moisture in the soil, and it powers through the heat stress.
It is a highly optimized piece of botanical hardware designed to solve a specific environmental problem.
Hardware, yes.
You can easily see why a software plumber would appreciate that kind of efficiency. But acquiring and successfully growing this highly optimized plant presents a significant challenge. And this is the part of the source material that I found most compelling, because Aang actually gives us a remarkably candid confession of failure.
He does, and that's rare to see.
Amidst all of his rigorous documentation and hundreds of logs of successes, he willingly points out a moment of vulnerability. He writes, "I remember trying to grow a similar cultivar once before, but I didn't have much luck."
In true engineering fashion, he doesn't just mention the failure, he immediately identifies the root cause of it.
Right, he doesn't blame the tools.
No, he doesn't blame the quality of the seed, and he doesn't blame the weather or the soil. He squarely blames his own process.
Process failure.
He writes that he failed because he simply left it to its own, which is my typical approach of handling celosia.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is an incredibly profound realization about the psychology of learning and expertise. Here we have an absolute master documenter.
On part 828.
Exactly. This is someone on part 828 of their gardening notes. They know celosia intimately. Their default methodology for handling this plant, putting it in the soil and simply leaving it to its own devices, has clearly worked for the tall standard varieties time and time again.
It became their standard operating procedure, their baseline set of instructions.
The problem is that the dwarf cultivar is not the standard variety.
Right.
It is a completely different biological system. It has a different height, a different foliage density, and an entirely different relationship with the sun and the soil around it.
And that is the trap of the expert.
The autopilot trap.
Exactly. When you achieve a high level of success or comfort in a specific area, you start to rely on your default methodologies. You go on autopilot.
Yeah.
Because Ang had been so successful with the standard Celosia in the past, he assumed that the exact same hands-off approach would yield the exact same result with the dwarf version.
The dwarf cultivar required a different strategy.
It needed a different kind of attention or intervention in its early stages.
It happens in almost every profession. You might think, I know how to manage a team of 5 people. So managing a team of 50 will just be the same exact process, just scaled up.
Just do more of the same.
Right. Or you think, I have mastered this one software language, so this new one should behave exactly the same way. And suddenly things are falling apart simply because you left the process to its own devices instead of adapting your approach to a new set of variables.
Success can breed complacency.
Absolutely.
Ang realized that his default script failed him when the parameters changed. Now, years later, armed with that self-awareness, he is ready to try again. He writes, "Perhaps this is the time to revisit Celosia, especially this dwarf cultivar."
Here's where it gets really interesting, because to try again, Ang has to formulate a strategy for sourcing his new seeds.
Right, he needs new inputs.
In the text, he outlines 2 distinct options. Option A, he can take the highly convenient route and just buy a generic packet of seeds from a store or an online catalog. Or option B, he can go out and source the seeds directly from an existing mature plant in his local area.
To a layperson, a seed is just a seed.
Sure.
The store-bought packet seems far more convenient and predictable. But Ang's conclusion, drawn from his vast database of experiential learning points, entirely in the other direction.
He reveals his insight right at the end of the post, stating definitively, based on experience, it's actually better to go with the former. He is referring to harvesting the seeds himself from a mature plant rather than buying a generic packet.
And he breaks down his reasoning into 2 distinct factors. The first is a simple matter of quality control.
Right.
When you harvest seeds directly from a living flower head, you are guaranteed fresher, higher quality seeds. You know exactly how old they are. You know, they haven't been sitting in a warehouse for 2 years, and, they haven't been exposed to wildly fluctuating temperatures in the back of a shipping truck.
But his second reason carries a much deeper philosophical weight. He says that the seeds harvested from a mature plant are already adapted to the local environment.
This raises an important question. How often do we try to force a generic mass-produced solution onto a highly localized, unique problem?
We do it all the time.
Constantly.
Right.
Let's connect this botanical fact right back to your own life and work. A generic packet of seeds is the ultimate one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
Those seeds were likely bred in a highly controlled, standardized greenhouse environment halfway across the world. They were designed to be good enough for the average, typical garden.
But Ang's garden isn't average. He explicitly noted earlier in the post that his environment features intense heat. If you take a seed that was optimized for a mild, generic, perfectly controlled climate and drop it into Ang's intense heat, it is going to struggle immensely.
It won't know what hit it.
It lacks the built-in biological resilience required to handle that specific environmental stress.
But a local plant that has survived to maturity tells a completely different story.
It's proven itself.
Exactly. That plant has already fought the battle against that intense heat, and it won. It has faced the specific local pests, the exact mineral composition of the local soil, and the unique humidity of the area.
And not only did it survive, it thrived enough to produce a flower and generate new seeds.
Those seeds carry a proven track record. They are pre-programmed by nature to succeed in the exact harsh conditions where Ang wants to plant them.
It is brilliant systems thinking. It is taking a proven localized solution that already works perfectly in your environment rather than trying to force a generic external system to function in a space it was never designed for. The software plumber understands that localized, optimized adaptation always outperforms a generic, mass-produced default.
It is a remarkable intellectual journey to extract from a blog post that takes less than 2 minutes to read.
It really is.
We have moved from the incredibly dense, meticulous digital archives of a software engineer who documents every single day of his life down to the specific physical characteristics of a tiny dwarf flower.
Yeah.
We've examined how even an expert can fail by relying too heavily on a hands-off default approach. And finally, we've arrived at this profound realization about the immense power of local adaptation.
So what does this all mean? To you listening right now, It means that the underlying principles of success and adaptation are universally applicable if you are willing to observe them closely.
Right. The same rules apply.
Whether you are managing a massive open source project with contributors from all over the globe, whether you are trying to learn a complex new skill, or whether you are just trying to plant some ground cover in your backyard that won't wither in the summer sun, recognizing the limits of a hands-off approach is absolutely crucial.
You can't just set it and forget it.
You cannot just leave things to their own devices if you want exceptional results, especially when you introduce a new variable into your environment. You have to observe, you have to log the data, and you have to adapt your methods.
Which brings us to a final lingering thought for you to explore on your own as you go about the rest of your day.
Yeah, let's hear it.
We've seen how a meticulous software engineer recognizes, based on years of logged experience, that a local mature plant yields vastly better results than a generic store-bought packet of seeds. He knows that local adaptation is the only way to survive the intense heat.
Right.
So look closely at your own life. Look at your career, your current personal projects, or your learning processes. What store-bought generic solutions are you currently trying to force into your daily routine?
That is a great question.
What standardized advice or one-size-fits-all methodologies are currently failing you simply because they haven't been adapted to your unique local environment and your unique challenges?
It is a powerful question to sit with. Maybe it is time to stop looking for the generic easy seed packet and start looking for the mature, proven solutions that are already thriving in the heat of your specific world. Keep digging, keep paying attention to the details, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.